All rise, please. Probate Court for Lenawee County is now in session. The Honorable Catherine A. Sella presiding.
Thank you. You may be seated.
Daniel the Skelton boys, file 53020ML, 53021ML, and 53022ML.
Thank you, Ms. Goudron. One of the first things we need to do today is to confirm whether or not Mr. Skelton wants to participate. So we've had someone log in. All right, good morning. Could you give us your name for the record, please?
Skelton.
Thank you. All right, well, he's here and ready to go. Here. Did you want to?
They told me that
Okay.
They told me I had to refuse here, and that's it. Ready to go.
Very good. Okay, please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yeah.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Skelton, you have the opportunity but not the obligation to participate in today's hearings. But I did want to make sure
Right.
that you had that opportunity. So you're welcome to tell me for the record now if you'd like to stay or go.
Yeah, I'm gonna go. I mean, everyone else has got lawyers. I don't. I'm at a disadvantage. Anything I say isn't gonna make a difference.
All right.
So,
Well, thank you for confirming that. And if you'd like to make your way back to wherever you need to go, then that's fine.
I mean,
Very good. All right, appearances from the rest of our participants, please.
Bert Castleberry on behalf of the petitioner Tanya Zuvers.
Your name for the record?
Tanya Zuvers.
Alexis Stang, P86700 on behalf of Andrew Alexander and Tanner Skelton.
Thank you. All right. Okay. So one of the things I did also indicate today was that we were going to be on YouTube. I have not done that yet, so let me do that before you begin your opening statements there, Mr. Kessler. We're on record for all three files. Now, one thing to be cognizant of would be, of course, the fact that if we're going to be on YouTube, we try to be cognizant of using the names of the children. In this case, I'll defer to you and your client on that piece, Mr. Castleberry, but I know in a lot of our cases that are otherwise broadcast, we do try to avoid using names. Do you have a preference on that?
Your Honor, the children are adults at this point. All three of them are over the age of 18. We have no objection to using their name. In fact, we encourage it.
Okay, all right. Very well. We are now officially on YouTube, ready to proceed in all three matters. Opening statements, Mr. Kessler.
Your Honor, because this is a bench trial, I do not have a long opening statement. I think the court will hear plenty of testimony over the next 3 days concerning what's going on. But what I do want to point out is why we are here and what we believe the law is pertaining to these three cases. And we will talk about this as if it's one case, but we understand there are three petitions before the court. And we believe that MCL 700.1208, paragraph 2, is what controls in this matter. And what that paragraph says is that an individual whose death is not otherwise established under this section or section 1207, and those sections are for accidents, and I know the court has seen cases like that before. I'm going to continue on with the MCL, who is absent for a continuous period of 5 years during which he or she has not been heard from, and whose absence is not satisfactorily explained after a diligent search or inquiry, is presumed to be dead, which means we are beginning this case with a presumption that the three children are deceased. The individual's death is presumed to have occurred at the end of the period. at the end of the 5 years, unless, and this is why we are here today, there is sufficient evidence to determine that death occurred earlier. It is our position that the evidence that we are going to present to you, Judge, is that Andrew, Alexander, and Tanner Skelton died on or about November 26th, 2010. Thank you.
I just briefly wanted to say that I am joining in the petitioner's request and am in support of the relief requested. Thank you.
All right, your first witness, Mr. Castle.
Your Honor, we would call Chief Larry Weeks.
Sorry, I missed that.
Chief Larry Weeks.
Chief Larry Weeks. Okay, wow.
Please raise your right hand, sir. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
It's okay. Good morning, Chief. How are you?
I'm doing okay, sir.
I understand you're a little under the weather today. Is that accurate?
Yes, sir.
I want you to understand, I know there are TV cameras here, but what's important is that the judge can hear what you're saying. If I don't say something loud enough, clear enough, or you don't understand something, stop me and ask me to repeat it, and we will make sure you understand the question, okay?
Yes, sir.
Also, I know you brought a water bottle with you. We understand you're not feeling well, so if you need to take a break, also just let us know, and we will get a break for you, okay?
Thank you for that.
Please state your name for the record.
Larry Weeks,
Please.
Larryweeks.
And where are you employed?
I'm currently the chief of police for the city of Eaton Rapids.
How long have you been the chief there?
Just over 11 years.
11 years. Where'd you work before that?
I was the chief of police for the city of Morenci.
Morenci, Michigan, and Lenawee County?
Correct.
And what training and experience do you have?
In total, I believe I have approximately 36 years of law enforcement experience. I've been trained in a variety of different investigative techniques, basic law enforcement principles. Professional training I've attended would be Eastern Michigan University School of Police Staff and Command and the FBI National Academy,
When did you go to Quantico?
2013.
2013. All right, so you were working in Morenci in 2010, is that right?
That's correct.
And did you have occasion to get to know the Skelton family?
I was acquainted with them. When you work in a community the size of Morenci, approximately 2,200 people, you become acquainted with lots of people in the community. I lived in the community, raised my family there during the time I was there, so I was very connected to the community, so I was acquainted with them. I often saw Tanya and her family out at different locations. Yeah.
Did there come a time around in September of 2010, that you maybe had a little more contact with the Skelton family?
Yes, in September of 2010, I received a message from the police department that Tanya had called. She was concerned because she relayed to me, once I met with her, that she was concerned that there was something going on with John in the sense that he had picked up the kids from school and had told the staff member there at the school that he was taking them on vacation. She told me that the staff member told her that the interaction seemed odd. His demeanor was odd, and that he was taking her children to Florida. We spoke about that. I did some quick legal queries, and it was my assumption that if his intent was to deprive the mother of the children, that he was violating the parental kidnapping law. I was able to reach out to John by telephone eventually, and threatened him with arrest if he did not come back. At the very least, sit down with Tanya and have a conversation with her about where the kids were going to be and, you know, what the whole plan was.
Okay. Just a formality, but do you recognize the petitioner in this matter?
I do.
And is that the Tanya that you're talking about?
Yes, sir.
And she's sitting in the courtroom to my right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So it's your understanding in this September incident that, were they divorced at that time?
No, but in the meeting that I sat in on when he did return, you know, it was clear that they were having marital problems that they discussed. John very much wanted to move his family to Jacksonville. He expressed that there were more job opportunities there. His family was located there. He believed it would be a better place for them to continue, you know, their family's life there. Tanya was concerned about having to relocate her family, you know, generally located in the Morenci area. And having been a registered sex offender, she was concerned that relocating to an unknown community and what the community may perceive of her,
Right.
where in Morenci, she indicated that, you know, she was able to live a comfortable life with people knowing that.
Gotcha. So you said you called John. Was he in Florida when you called him? Do you know?
I don't know specifically where he was at the time that I called him, but he did return. I don't want to testify to a time, but he did return in a reasonable amount of time, I would say, and met with us at the police department.
Chief, we understand that all this happened 15 years ago. I appreciate you not guessing, and we don't want you to guess, but we also understand that some of this has been a long time ago, so if we have to, if you just tell us the story as you remember, okay?
Yep.
So do you know what ended up happening? Did he end up taking the kids to Florida?
At the conclusion of the meeting, John took Andrew and Alexander with him, and Tanner, to my recollection, Tanner stayed behind with Tanya.
Okay. Do you know if there was anything more done with that?
I urged both parties to seek resolution in civil court so they could be more clarify their custodial matters on paper. Because in that position, I really lacked any authority to take more action than what I did.
Right. Is it your understanding, though, that a judge in Florida ordered the kids to come back to Michigan?
Yes, it's my understanding a judge ultimately ordered John and the children to come back, and then the proceedings continued here in Lenawee County.
Okay. And that's civil proceedings you're talking about?
Correct.
A divorce, correct?
My understanding was just the custodial matters, not a
Okay.
divorce issue.
So after the September incident, you became a little more familiar with their family. Do you remember what your next contact was with the family?
I don't know that it was my contact, but I believe I reviewed an incident report regarding Officer Ryan Hillard's response to
Okay.
that house.
And what do you remember about that?
I believe it was on the 21st of November. Officer Hillard documented in a report that he submitted to me that I believe it was Alexander that called 911 out of fear that he could not find his father in the house, and felt that he might be in some sort of danger.
So the three children, in which one is Alexander? Is he
He's
the
the
oldest,
middle.
the middle, the youngest?
He's the middle boy.
So he's the middle child. And you say that he called 911?
I believe that's accurate.
And he called 911 because he couldn't find his father. Is that correct?
Correct. Is my understanding. They didn't know where he was at.
Okay. And do you know, did the police respond?
According to the report, Officer Hillard responded and made contact with the boys and John, and John indicated in some way that he had stepped away and had informed the boys of where he was at, and alleged there was just some sort of confusion. And then, according to the officer, everything was fine and he left.
So is it fair to say that if the children were in danger, they knew to call 911?
Yes, from my opinion, I thought that was fairly savvy of a 7-year-old boy at that time to be alert enough and aware enough to make that call in that situation.
After that, you said that was November 21st.
Yes, sir.
What was your next contact with the Skelton family?
On November 26th, I was at home. I received a call in the evening from Officer Hillard. He indicated he was at the Fulton County Medical Center near Waseon, Ohio. He explained to me over the phone that he had what I would describe as a disturbing situation. I explained that John was there with an ankle injury and was acting extremely erratic. He was having a difficult time getting specific information out of him as far as what had transpired and led him to this point at the hospital. He explained that the whereabouts of John and Tanya's children, Andrew, Alexander, and Tanner, 9, 7, and 5, were unknown at this point, and he was concerned about their safety.
Did he bring up the name Joanne Taylor?
He went on to explain that the best he could get from John was that they were with a woman by the name of Joanne Taylor, and Joanne's husband his name was Mark, and he was a pastor.
Okay. Did Mr. Skelton say anything about suicide or trying to kill himself?
Yes, and that and it was implied that's how he injured his ankle, and it was in his intention to harm himself. Ultimately, secured a ride from a family member after the failed attempt.
So it's fair to say he failed to kill himself? Your understanding?
That's what he described.
Okay. So then what did you do next? My notes, I have that you went to the Morenci PD and to meet with Officer Hillard. Is that accurate?
Correct. I explained to him that once he cleared the hospital, we would meet up at the police department and make some decisions about next steps. He explained to me that he had been in contact with family members. They'd been over to the home. Family members had already forced entry to the home in an effort to look for the children, and that the house is in a complete state of disarray. And I wanted to look at the situation and assess it myself, so we went over to the house again.
What did you see there?
I agreed that the house was in disarray. Glass and cabinets had been broken. Electrical cords to the appliances had all been cut. There was a Bible laying on a table in the living room with a verse circled. Officer Hillard informed me that a notebook had been turned over to him by a family member that had been located at the residence, that based on the way he read it, he believed to be a suicide note. I read it. I concurred.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness? Now, Chief, I just showed you something, and we're not marking it as an exhibit at this point, but you just brought up the suicide note. And I think it's the witness.
Our black microphone, that bigger square black one, is the one that's recording, so just maybe try not to.
Do you want me to back up?
The paper sometimes get out of the microphone.
Yes, Judge, thank you.
Chief, I've just handed you 4 pieces of paper. And do you recognize those 4 pieces of paper?
I do.
And is that the note that you're speaking of?
It appears to be yes.
Yes. And you said you read that note.
I did.
Was there anything remarkable about that note that you remember?
Not at this moment.
Okay. Do you remember that it was a suicide note?
Yes.
Okay. And next, may I approach the witness again, Your Honor? I'm not going to. Chief, next, did you meet with a Charlene O'Brien?
Well, there was one additional thing we found in the
Okay.
home that I wanted to mention as
Okay.
well. Officer Hillard explained when he entered the home, there appeared to be a noose hanging from a second-story balcony.
Okay.
And he had moved the noose because it was tied to a door handle. And when he needed to clear the house to look for the children, he had to move the noose to be able to get in the room. But he restaged it for me to show me what it looked like.
And that was Officer Hillard.
Yes,
So the house was in a complete disarray, destroyed.
correct.
There were broken glass, you said,
Yes,
broken cabinets.
yes,
It just, and then what appears to be a noose and a suicide note, right?
yes.
Next, did you meet with a Charlene O'Brien?
Once we completed our, my assessment of the information there at the address on Congress Street, we returned to the station.
Let me stop you for a second. When you say Congress Street, is
One-
that the Skelton home?
Yes,
Okay,
112 East Congress Street.
thank you. I don't think we ever put that in. Thank you.
That's okay. We returned to the office, began discussing next steps. While we were there, excuse me. Apologize. While we were there, Charlene O'Brien, who I believe is John's aunt, knocked at our door, at the police department. She presented me with a suitcase that had a laptop in it. She explained that John was on the computer often, and she said that John, earlier in the day, had come to her house and Lisa Kern's house across the street from hers and dropped these items off, along with other personal items, including the boy's toothbrush, and gave them to her, gave these items to them.
So you're saying that you were told that John Skelton went to Charlene O'Brien's house and Lisa Kern's house, and this is November 26, 2010.
Correct.
And do you know what time he went there?
I believe it was around 7:15 in the morning. I
Okay.
could double check my notes.
So about 7:15 a.m. Now, November 26th, what day is that? Do you know what day that was? Was it a Thursday, a Friday? Do you remember?
It was the day after Thanksgiving. It was a Friday.
Okay, so we're talking about Black Friday.
Correct.
Now, in this suitcase that he dropped off, you say he dropped off items at two separate locations?
That's my understanding.
And what's the proximity of these two locations? Are they close together?
They're somewhat kitty corner from each other in a rural area outside of the city.
Can you see from one place to the other?
I don't recall if it's tree covered or not, to be honest with you.
Okay.
It's been too long.
But he left, I apologize, my Bluetooth is connected to my watch. You say he left toothbrushes, the children's toothbrushes?
Yeah, we believe them to be the boys' toothbrushes and coats and, again, other personal items.
So the children's winter coats and their toothbrushes, he left them at his aunt's house, is what you were told.
Correct.
And those items were delivered to you, correct?
Well, at this point, she only delivered the laptop, the items that were in the suitcase, which was the laptop. There were other items that, in a follow-up interview and contact with members of our investigative team had with her, we collected the rest of the items that
I
she
guess.
said.
But she came to tell you that those items had been left that morning?
Yes.
At around 7 a.m., is that accurate?
Yes. when she gave me the laptop, she said that I could do whatever I needed to do with it, anything that would help potentially locate, the boys and bring them home.
So at this point, it's your understanding that these 3 children are missing and there's no plausible explanation as to where they're at. Is that accurate?
Yes, particularly after speaking with, a relative of John's, who indicated that, to the best of her knowledge, the boys weren't with any family members here in the area on his side. So having had Tanya and family members, from that side of the family indicate they weren't there with anyone there, and then, of course, anyone on John's side of the family, that was making our concern grow even more.
Are you familiar with the term exigent circumstances?
I am.
And would you agree that exigent circumstances are when there's something so important that you have to take action to try to, for safety of human life,
Yes.
right? And so you did look in that computer, right?
Yeah, being fearful for the life of the boys, I started the computer up, and it did my novice understanding of electronics as it relates to handling that device. I did some cursory searching and was able to find what appeared to me to be that email addresses set up for one Joanne Taylor were accessed by that computer.
I got you. So you could see that an email address for Joanne Taylor had been accessed from this computer owned by John Skelton?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, well, and then later on in the investigation, once a more thorough forensic analysis was done, we were able to link the email address being created at the IP address commonly used by John. So that more directly linked it to him.
So I know we're both novices when it comes to computers, but we do understand. Tell me if I want to know if you agree with me on this. The IP address is for the location of where the computer's located, right? Is that accurate? How it's connecting to the internet?
Yeah, it's kind of like a physical address for electronic device.
And so what you discovered through this forensic examination is that the email account for Joanne Taylor was created at the same location this computer's been used before. Is that accurate?
Yes.
And is that address, physical address, Congress Street in Morenci?
Well, the IP address is known to be used at that address of 112 Congress Street.
Thank you. So in other words, the email account for Joanne Taylor was created more than likely at Congress Street in Morenci, Michigan.
Yes.
Okay. Now, I know that Officer Hillard had spoken to Tanya, and do you remember what time the children were supposed to be returned to her on November 26, 2010?
I believe it was 3 p.m. in the afternoon.
Okay. And where, if you can remember, did John say the kids were? Or who were they with?
Well, as I indicated, he had told Officer Hillard that they were with this Joanne Taylor, and he had also communicated that with Tanya via text message that the children were going to be late and that the kids were with a Joanne Taylor.
Now, this is the same Joanne Taylor that you just testified that through a forensic evaluation is determined that an email address for her was created at John Skelton's home.
That's my understanding, yes.
And there's never been any discovery of a Joanne Taylor.
No, in fact, as I believe I'll explain later, but as our team grew, an investigative team grew, we had one team member that was assigned specifically just to do that, to attempt to locate the Joanne Taylor that was described, and no such person was ever discovered.
And in fact, did you learn through part of the FBI's investigation that John Skelton even questioned whether he was Joanne Taylor? Questioned himself, is that accurate?
That's true.
And made statements to the FBI that he needed to know 95% sure whether he was a child killer or not because he remembered them being with Joanne Taylor.
That's true.
Thank you. Now, at some point, you're going through this, the children are missing, you have a laptop, you have their winter coats, their toothbrushes. How are you feeling? Are you worried about them?
Yeah, we had, after Charlene O'Brien's visit, we began distributing more broader, what we call BOLs in law enforcement, be on the lookouts for Joanne Taylor, any alleged vehicle description we had, anything like that. We've done some preliminary searching through a law enforcement information network to try to locate anybody with a, that possibly might match that. We just were running into dead ends. And it was clear the case was going beyond the resources that I had at the Morenci Police Department, and certainly due to the apparent imminent potential threat to the boys, I made the decision to contact the Michigan State Police Operations Center and initiate an Amber Alert.
And so after that, you had other agencies helping you.
Yeah, shortly after that, as a matter of protocol, my understanding now, and shortly after that process is initiated, I received calls from the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the Michigan State Police, and the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. All three organizations advised they were willing to come assist with our investigation, asked brief details, and my response to all of them was, yes, happy to have your support, and they all dispatched personnel to our location to assist.
So you just named three organizations. You named the Michigan State Police and the Federal Bureau of Investigation, which I think we all are kind of familiar with, somewhat, at least we know who they are. But what is the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children?
The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, I don't know the year it was created. His name escapes me now. I was well known from crime shows now, but his son was murdered many years ago in Florida.
John Walsh?
John Walsh, thank you, sir. John Walsh spearheaded the creation of the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, and that program assists with a variety of different things related to missing children, age progression photos. They can analyze photographs of abused children from all over the country and potentially link them together. They have investigative support that they can render. They had what they call I believe an ATOM team member was on the scene with us, assisting us. And at one point we traveled and met with them and did a brief presentation on this case to a variety of investigative experts, psychologists, and presented our case there to them.
And so they got involved.
I'm sorry again.
Oh, you're okay. Do you need to take a break?
No, sir.
Okay. Make sure you drink your water.
Yes, sir.
Stay hydrated. So the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children became involved in this case on November 26, 2010.
Correct.
And to the best of your knowledge, they're still involved today.
Yes, I've seen the age, I'm not actively involved in the investigation anymore, but I have seen over the years the release of the age progression photos.
So I'm glad you brought that up. When you say age progression photos, even back in 2010, once this Amber Alert gets issued, there are pictures sent out of what these children look like, right? You have to speak it.
Sorry, yes. We created our own missing flyer initially, but once they got involved, the flyer evolved.
And even, I think you said you left Morenci, was it 2012? When did you leave as chief?
Late November 2013.
2013. So every year on the anniversary of this, did you have flyers created?
To my knowledge, they do that as a matter of course of action.
When you say they, who do you mean?
The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children.
But did you see those photos distributed?
Well, they have a very robust distribution network, so much greater than I do. So they were good at getting that out nationally.
Didn't you also do a roadside check of vehicles just to ask questions of if they'd seen the children?
Yeah, a year to the date, and we did it approximately the same time that we believed that John had potentially driven through an area, Morenci Road at 127. We didn't know for sure he'd driven through that particular intersection. We really were just, based on where we believed he'd started and where we knew his cell phone had traveled, it was possible he'd passed through that intersection. So we partnered with the state police during the time of day that the morning that we believed he could have driven through there. And as cars drove through, we passed out flyers, asked if anybody had potentially seen his vehicle. Excuse me again. Unfortunately, we weren't able to develop any leads out of that.
But it's fair to say, as long as you worked in Morenci, you never stopped looking for these children.
That's correct.
Okay. And you never found any sign of life of these 3 children, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, let's get back to the laptop. Talk about Skelton's internet, when I say Skelton, John Skelton, his internet activity under the exigent circumstances. There was the Joanne Taylor email account. Were there other accounts?
Yeah, there was a Cafe Mom account.
What is Cafe Mom?
It is well, I don't know if it still exists, to be quite honest, but it was a website, like a blog. It was for moms to support one another, coordinate, recipes, play dates, share
Okay.
aspects of child raising, whatever they could do to support moms.
Okay. So you found a Cafe Mom account on there?
Yeah, it appeared that, at least from that laptop, an account was surreptitiously created in an effort to communicate with Tanya by John.
So it appears that John Skelton created his own Cafe Mom account.
Yes, pretending to be someone else.
And he was using that account to talk to Tanya Zuvers?
He was communicating with her through the messaging system.
And when you said surreptitiously, in other words, he didn't tell her it was John.
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. Was there also a Yahoo account?
Yes.
Okay. And now all of these accounts, through this this investigation, were determined to be from the same IP address. Is that accurate?
That's correct.
Okay. Was there also a search of cellular telephone movement for Friday, November 26th?
There was, based on the search warrant of John's cellular records, at approximately 4:13 a.m. on the 26th, tower information puts the phone in the vicinity of his home.
Now, that's Congress Street?
Yes.
Okay.
At approximately 4:29 a.m., the phone is on the move, appears to be on the move away from the home.
Okay.
At approximately 5 a.m., his phone hits off a tower near Pioneer, Ohio. And then 5:01, 5:04 a.m., the phone hits off the towers again near Lazy River Campground in Ohio, Williams County.
Okay.
And then at 6:46 a.m., the phone appears to be back in the proximity of his home.
Okay. So it's your understanding that through whatever visitation arrangement that Tanya and John had the 3 boys on Thanksgiving and was supposed to deliver them to Tanya at 3 p.m. on the 26th. Is that correct?
It's my understanding, I don't recall this moment if that was dictated by court order, but that was certainly an arrangement the 2 of them had.
Okay. And so the time that you're talking about, you just went through 4:13 a.m. on November 26th. So this is time that the 3 children were with John Skelton. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So, and to your knowledge and through your investigation, there was no one else at the house, was there?
Well, I guess I would have to back up. It's my understanding the children were with him. At some point, they are no longer with him. I guess I don't know for sure, when that occurs.
Right, but what I'm saying is, from your investigation, you would agree that that was his visitation time,
Correct.
correct? And during his visitation time, when Tanya is not there with him, and to your knowledge, no one else is there, correct?
Correct.
He left his home at around 4:30 in the morning, correct?
Correct.
And he came back sometime around 6:45.
Correct.
And during this time, or at least his cell phone did, right?
That's correct.
Because that's what you're tracking is the cell phone.
Well, we did speak to a witness, Christy Schaefer, who indicated that she had gone by John's house about 5 a.m. and had stated that she did not see his van at that location. So we do know his phone is not at the residence and the van is not at the residence at 5 a.m.
Thank you, Chief. And I know that it's 2025 today, but this happened in 2010, right?
That's correct.
And what happens in 2010 on Black Friday?
Well, people
Generally, with
yeah,
stores.
people are out shopping.
Okay, so it's not unusual for someone to drive by the house at 5 a.m. on Black Friday.
That's correct.
And it's your understanding that that person just noticed the van wasn't there. Is that correct?
That's my understanding.
And who was that?
Christy Schaefer.
So we know that, based on the cell phone, that the cell phone left at 4:30 and did not return, and went into Ohio, hit off towers in Ohio, and came back to Congress Street around 6:45, correct?
That's correct.
We also know that a family member drove by the house around 5 o'clock in the morning, and the van wasn't there.
Correct.
So it makes sense that the phone and the van were together,
It'd be reasonable to surmise that.
and somebody's probably driving the van, correct?
Correct.
Okay, I know this was a very large investigation, Chief, and I know that it's my understanding that when there are large investigations, many agencies working together, you have briefings. Is that correct?
That's correct.
You have meetings with all the agencies and put a plan together?
We met regularly. The dynamics changed, so we often had impromptu discussions about what the next steps were.
But part of that is so that you're all not doing the same thing, right?
Correct.
And you want to use your resources as much as you can to investigate. Is that fair to say?
That's correct.
Okay. And did you learn of an interview with John Skelton at Toledo St. Vincent's Hospital?
Yeah, we had learned that John had been transferred from Fulton County to St. Vincent's in Toledo. He'd been acting erratically, so they transferred him up there for further observation. We met as a team, made some decisions about what the next steps were, and ultimately determined Detective Sergeant Ed Price and Special Agent Mike Glennon would be sent to the hospital to potentially interview him and see if we could.
What did you learn from that?
During their conversations with John, he shared that he believed that the boys had been wrapped in a blanket and then placed at a old schoolhouse near Kunkel, Ohio. And at this stage of our investigation, we had a plethora of law enforcement in the area, and at the police department, which was our command post. And so we dispatched personnel and myself down to two different schoolhouses near Kunkel, Ohio. One was I don't know if it was an old elementary school, but it had been converted into residential living, and another was more of a historic one-room style. I don't know if it was one room, but one-room style schoolhouse. And we checked those areas pretty thoroughly and weren't able to find the boys.
Now, let me back up, just one, I want to make sure I understand. John Skelton told the team that the boys were wrapped in blankets and placed in an old schoolhouse in Kunkel, Ohio. Is that what you said?
Correct.
And so then a team was dispatched to search any schoolhouse in Kunkel, Ohio. Is that what you're saying?
Well, he said an old schoolhouse, so we identified those two locations as being really the only old two schoolhouses, and we checked them.
And what'd you find?
Nothing. Nothing.
What else did they learn? Did he describe a nightmare?
Well, after our initial findings, or negative findings, came back from our searches, they went back in and spoke with him again. During this time, John described having a nightmare, and within this nightmare, he describes what he thinks is Joanne Taylor, but he's unsure if it was possibly himself. And he explains that he is, I believe, is it 95% sure that the boys were in a dumpster near Holiday City, Ohio. He urges the interviewers to respond and get his boys. He refers to himself being perceived as a monster. He's concerned, he expresses concern about being perceived as a child killer during the course of this interview.
And this is also when he says that he may be Joanne Taylor.
Yes, he was unsure, as he described.
And is it true that he also drew a picture of the location and the dumpster?
He did.
Was that investigated?
Yeah, we certainly had folks in that area already, so agents went and responded to that area, checked the dumpsters, and it discovered that the dumpsters have already been dumped. Follow-up with Waste Management Company discovered that the trucks that picked up the dumpster and the dumpsters in the area went to Waste Management of Ohio, and communication with those folks, they keep track of where trucks dump things in the waste area, in the dump site, and were able to point us in a direction. The FBI's evidence recovery team sent several people out to the location and performed a search of the area that we were told that truck dumped its load.
Okay.
And unfortunately, we're not able to locate anything.
Now, as this investigation continued, there were more search warrants done. Is that right?
Yeah, as we talk about this, we talk about it kind of step by step, but there's a lot of things happening at the same time, right? So we have search warrants going on. We're still searching electronic devices, trying to track down as much data as we can collect. It might lead us to where the boys' whereabouts are.
And this is all happening simultaneously, correct?
Yeah,
So there's a team working on search warrants, there's a team interviewing, there's a team searching. All these things are happening at the same time.
correct.
Okay. And one of the searches, did you find some internet activity regarding poison?
Yeah, a search of John Skelton's laptop showed search. I should stop. I don't recall if that particular was on his laptop or his other computer, but I do recall that a search of his computer discovered that there was a search for rat poison, and can rat poison kill a person?
Did you say can rat poison kill a person?
I did.
Did you also find anything about breaking a neck or anything like that?
We found he'd conducted a search on the 20th of November, how to break a neck and spine, spinal cord, and cerebellum.
Okay. Was there also additional social media activity that you found?
We found a Facebook post from November 24th where he states, and I quote, "I love my wife very much. May God and Tanya forgive me."
Was there another one around on that same day, about 2.5 hours after that?
Yeah, he messaged, I don't know their, relationship in total, but a Herschel Ward, at least an acquaintance of his, said he was killing himself tonight, but right now he was fine.
Okay. Did you also find, is this also when you found out about the cafe mom and that he was actually communicating with Tanya?
Well, that's when we discovered
Disguised.
more thoroughly the records. We were able to retrieve more of the records related to that activity.
Okay. Now, did you also end up with text messages? Did you do cell phone searches?
Yeah, I think I mentioned earlier that we recovered the text messages from the cell phone of the exchange between John and Tanya leading up to his scheduled time to meet to turn the children over, in which he states, that he's going to be late and that the kids are with this Joanne Taylor.
So you learned through the text messages that a text was sent from his phone to Tanya's phone saying that the kids were not with him and they were with a Joanne Taylor, correct?
Correct.
And that's the same Joanne Taylor, in your opinion, that was created by John Skelton.
Yes.
Now, after we talk, I know that it's hard to keep it because everything's happening at one time. It's hard to separate out. But now I want to talk a little bit about the searches. I understand there was quite a massive search put together. Is that accurate?
Yes. We began having local citizens and people from the area start showing up and just randomly searching city parks and areas where they thought the boys might be. And it became a little bit of a logistical challenge for us. I ended up meeting with then Fire Chief Chad Schisler. We discussed trying to create some organization to it, bring some focus to it. In addition, we had received complaints about people going on private property and things like that.
Right.
So, the decision was made to try to organize that, and hopefully with some of the tips that we might get about a particular area, we could deploy a lot more people in a quicker time. And we had integrated with the fire department some officers from the area that would kind of help out if they saw anything suspicious or there was some concern. At our peak, I think we had about 425 volunteers that showed up for nearly a week.
You also had multiple fire departments, correct?
Yeah, we had fire agencies from all over the region. I couldn't even begin to list them now.
I know Toledo was, or I read that Toledo was involved. Is that correct?
Yeah, Toledo Fire was involved as well.
Now, I'm not submitting these as evidence, but do you recognize the things that I'm holding up?
I do. Those are maps that the fire chief and I, so each morning, I would try to meet with the fire chief, and we would talk about the areas that have been searched so far, and based on information we were developing or tips we were getting, as cell phone data came in, things like that, try to nudge them in that, in different directions. And if we didn't have anything, if I didn't have anything specific to get to him, we knew that John's phone at least had left the house and had gone down to Holiday City, Ohio, and then at some point come back. So I had mentioned to the chief if we could do our best to literally search every public area, public roadway, public parks, publicly accessible locations in southwest Lenawee County, northwest Fulton County, northwest Williams County, and southeast Hillsdale County. And those are the maps we used to do that.
You recognize this?
I do.
What is it?
was generated by the fire department. It was used to track all the volunteers, the teams they were assigned to, and, you know, many of the different search locations that they were assigned to.
You would agree there's hundreds of pages here.
It's a voluminous book.
And this is when your team and multiple volunteers, you said 425, you searched all the areas where the cell phone tower hit, is that correct?
As much as we could.
Okay. Now, at some point, there was a pastor, and the pastor is Donna Galloway. You familiar with Donna?
I am familiar with Donna.
What do you know about Donna Galloway?
Donna, I don't know if she still is, but at the time was a pastor at a local church in Morenci, and she was acquainted with Tanya
And John?
and John.
Okay. And did she come in to assist your investigative team during some interviews?
Well, one particular contact of note is John had somehow telephoned Tanya's cell number, and Donna got on the phone and spoke with him. She reported to me that during that conversation, as she was pressing John for the locations of the boys, that he mentioned, said something to the effect of, "I sent them home. Don't you understand? I sent them home."
So, just so I have the wording correct, I sent them home. Don't you understand? I sent them home.
Correct.
And he's saying that to his pastor.
Correct.
What does that mean to you?
If you're asking my opinion,
I'm asking your opinion.
you're speaking to a person of faith, a person that believes in God. The impression it leaves me with is that he sent them to heaven.
He murdered them. He murdered them.
That's certainly a conclusion.
So, did you arrest John Skelton at some point?
Yes, we did. We consulted with the Lenawee County Prosecutor's Office, and on November 30th, we made contact, as our team made contact with John in Toledo, took him into custody, and he was later extradited and brought back here to Lenawee County for prosecution for 3 counts of unlawful kidnapping.
Okay. And was he
Unlawful imprisonment, I'm sorry.
That's okay. So he was charged with 3 counts of unlawful imprisonment.
1 count for each boy.
Okay. And on January 17th, was he interviewed at the Adrian Police Department?
He was.
And what'd you learn from that?
He was interviewed by Detective Sergeant Cindy Gokenauer and Special Agent Sue Lucas. I observed the interview remotely. During the course of that interview, John, as he had done previously, his story continued to change about, the whereabouts of the boys. He ultimately acknowledged that Joanne was a backstory created, and that, in fact, it was part of this clandestine operation to move the kids to a secret organization. What he described was that he was at a truck stop near Niles, Michigan. He was eating in the restaurant, struck up some conversation with a guy there, and out of that conversation, the guy indicated that he had connections to a secret organization that could facilitate moving the kids safely. Not long after that conversation, John said that he began receiving nondescript envelopes in the mail with instructions and paperwork regarding this organization, and a cell phone with a pre-programmed phone number in it. When we attempted, or when the interviewers attempted to seek verification, and can you provide any of that, documentation or anything, he explained that the instructions were to burn the materials and or return the other items that weren't burnt. And this exchange apparently went on for a period of time until the boys were turned over to this organization that he identified as United Foster Outreach and Underground Sanctuaries.
Okay, so during this interview, you state that he admits that he lied. Is that correct?
Yes,
So he's a liar.
yes,
Okay. And then he tells you about an underground organization that he has zero proof exists. Is that correct?
that's correct.
And you already know that he dropped off the children's coats and toothbrushes and other items at his aunt's house the morning of November 26th. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And conveniently, in this made-up story, he states, well, I had to burn everything that would have shown that any of this is true. Is that correct?
Yeah, what he didn't burn, he said he had to return. So he wouldn't have any of the items available.
So he gave you zero proof of this organization.
That's correct.
Did you ever find out any information about this organization?
No, certainly as an investigative team, we all used our available resources, databases and such to search if there's any existence of this organization, and no one was ever able to turn anything up.
Do you believe John Skelton killed his 3 children on or about November 26, 2010?
I do.
In fact, you announced that this was a murder investigation within a couple of months of this happening. Is that correct?
Yes, I did.
During your time working on this case, did you ever see any evidence or any hint that these children may be alive?
No, I'm confident they're deceased.
And are you confident that they were killed on or about November 26, 2010?
I am.
Now, one final question. When you left the Morenci Police Department, what did you do with the investigation?
One of the team members that we worked with was a Lieutenant Sean Furlong from the state police. I contacted him, told him that I would be changing jobs, and I thought the best place for this case at this point was going to be in their hands. I ended up meeting, myself and Officer Hillard ended up meeting with him, and then Detective Brewer at our station. We turned over all the materials, evidence, everything related to the case to them.
And Detective Brewer works with the Michigan State Police, is that correct?
Correct.
I have no further questions at this time, Your Honor.
Yes, thank you. Good morning.
Good morning, ma'am.
Did you ever personally meet the 3 children at any point prior to their disappearance?
Yeah, I was at their house one time, and I don't, off the top of my head, I don't recall specifically what it was, but I was at their house, and I believe it was Alexander was in this cool little police getup, and he was telling me how he wanted to be a police officer someday. It was a real, it stuck with me at the time, and even certainly after the incident, it's stuck with me ever since.
Okay. And you stated you don't recall the reason that you would have been there at that point?
Not off the top of my head right now.
Okay. Do you recall when that would have been in relation to the investigation starting?
I don't. I'm
Okay.
sorry.
And then earlier you testified about Alexander calling 911 on November 21st, 2010, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And that was because he could not find his father, John Skelton, within the home, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And Was it your understanding that the children would have been with John at that point due to it being his parenting time with the children?
I can't speak specifically to what the parenting time schedule was. I'd have to review that material.
Okay.
But I can only assume that that was the case.
Okay. Do you recall if at that point in time, and again, this would have been 6 days prior to the last time the boys had been seen, do you recall if both Tanya and John were residing at that home, or was it just John at that point?
I think I know the answer to that question, but I'm not as confident with it to be able to provide an answer.
Okay. May I approach? Okay, so what I just handed you has been marked as proposed Exhibit S6. Does that document look familiar to you?
It does.
Okay, and can you identify that for the court?
This is a report from September 13th of 2010 that I completed regarding the incident I testified to earlier regarding John attempting to take the kids to Florida.
Okay, and is that document then an accurate representation of your investigation with regards to that call?
To my knowledge, yes.
Okay, and in that police report, what time did the call come in that day?
11 a.m.
Okay, and can you just remind us who was the caller at that point?
Tanya was the caller calling the police department asking for an officer regarding what was happening.
Okay, and what was happening, that would have been when John initially took the boys from school and headed to Florida, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and based on that report and based on your conversation with Tanya, how did she tell you that she first became aware of the fact that John had taken the boys from school?
I believe Kathy Wood, the school support staff member, notified her.
Okay, and did you ever personally speak with Kathy Wood from the school?
I'd have to review the report. I don't
That,
recall
you can do
specifically
that, that's
doing
fine.
Karen Wood, I'm sorry. Yeah, my report indicates I did, that I spoke with Karen at the elementary school in the office.
Okay. And based on your recollection or report, do you recall why Ms. Wood would have called Tanya about the children being taken from school?
Well, John had indicated that the records for the children may need to be forwarded to Florida, and that was one of the things that gave her concern that he was leaving with them.
Okay. So is it your understanding then that Ms. Wood didn't necessarily have to call Tanya, but she did due to the just concerning nature of the statements made to her by John that day?
That's correct.
Okay. I would move to have that exhibit admitted into evidence.
No objection.
Thank you. It may be received. Would you like it published in time?
Yes,
I would.
please.
Thank you, sir.
I'm not quite following up the
Yes. Okay. And do you recall who the last person or people were that would have seen the boys prior to their disappearance other than John Skelton?
My recollection is we interviewed Adam Johnson, a neighbor who had seen them, two of the boys in the backyard the day before they went missing.
Okay, so that would have been November 25th then, correct? Okay. And did this man make any statements regarding what the children were doing in the backyard specifically?
I think he just said they saw them back there playing, just
Okay.
hanging out.
So nothing concerning regarding what he saw them doing in the backyard that day?
No.
Okay. And you testified that there had been that failed suicide attempt by John Skelton on November 26, 2010, which would have been the day the children had last been known to be alive, and that there was that suicide note that you testified to earlier. In your professional opinion, and based on the fact that you testified earlier that John is known to lie, do you believe that that was a real suicide attempt?
I do.
You do? Okay. Do you know how John got to the hospital that day?
He was transported by a cousin or something, if I recall correctly.
Okay. You testified earlier that John had drove a van, correct? Just in general? Okay. Was that the only vehicle that you had known John to own and drive?
Recall him having a motorcycle. The van is the only one I'm familiar with.
Okay. And earlier you testified that the van was not at the home around 5:30 a.m. based on that witness that came forward and said that they had driven by that day and, on the 26th and hadn't seen the van parked in the driveway. Are you aware of if the van was at the home in the
affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
All of our
Your
senior
Honor.
parties and attorneys have rejoined us.
Your Honor, we call FBI Special Agent Corey Burris.
Would you spell that for us, please?
Coreyburras. Right? See?
Okay, thank you.
Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Watch your step there.
Just for the record, I always misspell his name, by the way, so. I must have finally learned it.
Well, you're a little far away. Was it a D or a P? The beginning of your last name?
B as in
B as in
boy.
boy.
Thank you. Okay, all right. Well, I'm glad I asked. Proceed though.
Please state your name for the record.
My name is Corey Burris.
And Mr. Burris, where are you employed?
I'm employed as a special agent with the Federal Bureau of Investigation in our Detroit field office.
Okay. And how long have you worked with the Federal Bureau of Investigation?
I've been with the FBI since May of 2002.
May of 2002. What did you do before May of 2002?
I was a corrections field supervisor for the state of Wisconsin.
Okay. What is that? What did you do as that?
Within the state of Wisconsin, I ran probation and parole offices for 2 separate units. I was also part of a sex offender review committee for all the sexually violent persons in the state of Wisconsin, so I was part of their assessment and review team.
And then you applied to the Federal Bureau of Investigation?
I had applied to the FBI in 1998.
Okay. And so you did you go to school in Quantico?
I did.
And what does that entail?
It's about 4 months of rigorous training, both legal, physical, mechanical, a lot of just the basic training that'd be required to have basic competence to become an agent in the field.
Okay. And you said you've worked there since 2002, was it?
Yes.
So about 23 years of experience with the FBI plus prior law enforcement experience.
Yes.
Are you familiar with the case of the Skelton children?
I am.
And how did you come into contact with this case, or how did you become knowledgeable about this case?
I was, at the point I was assigned to our Ann Arbor resident agency, which does cover Lenawee and many other counties. I received notice that there's an Amber Alert, and I was ordered to report to Morenci, and I did report to Morenci on or about November 26th or the early morning of November 27th,
Okay.
2010.
So we had prior testimony that an Amber Alert went out sometime after 10 p.m. And what you're saying is you responded somewhere shortly after that. Is that
Yes,
accurate?
yes, I responded to Morenci.
But you didn't look at your watch to say I stepped in at
Correct.
12:01 or 11:15?
Right.
Understood. So when this Amber Alert was issued, what were you informed of? Take your time, take your
yeah.
time.
I was informed of there are 3 missing children who were last in the custody of their father, John Skelton.
Okay.
That they failed to be returned to the mom at the pre-designated time. At that stage, I'd learned that he was in the hospital, and the children were unaccounted for.
Okay. And did you then respond to 112 East Congress Street?
I initially showed up to our command post. I think
Okay.
it was at the Morenci Police Department or the City Hall. I think they were combined. And I was assigned to stay in the Skelton residence as we were getting all the other resources available, get Michigan State Police, all their forensic people there. So I stayed in the house that first night.
So when you say you showed up to the command post, how many people are there? Who's there?
Initially, I was one of the first responders, so there was only a handful.
Okay.
I think Larry was there, Chief Weeks was there. We had a couple FBI agents. I think our on-duty agent was there. And I showed up. I think a local police officer was there. There was not, by the time I showed up, there was not a large group of people.
And it became larger as you were there, is that accurate?
Yeah, we, within a day or two, we had 50 to 75 FBI agents, plus all of our personnel in command and specialties there.
Okay. Did you become aware of an incident in September of 2010 as part of this briefing when you showed up?
Yeah, I was informed that John Skelton had brought the 3 children from Rensselaer down to Florida without the consent of mom of Tanya Skelton. Yeah, we also learned through talking with Tanya that he was allowed to have visitation on certain days and times with the children, but the children were in the primary care of Ms. Skelton.
Okay. So he, in other words, John Skelton was exercising parenting time, visiting time
Yes,
with
sir.
children. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay. And was there a time when Tanya Skelton, or Tanya Zuvers now, was interviewed by the FBI?
Yes, there was during the initial response.
And is that where you learned this information of what had transpired over the few months prior to the reason for the Amber Alert?
Yes.
Okay. As part of the investigation, the FBI, did they discover some accounts?
Yes, we started a robust investigation. Part of the initial findings, we're going through some email traffic, and we learned that John Skelton had created a Yahoo account. John Skelton, 1971 at yahoo.com. That was created on or about October 30th of 2010.
Okay. Was there another?
Yes, we learned another Yahoo account was created on or about November 6th of 2010 in the name of Joanne_Taylor at yahoo.com. It is interesting, the same IP address that was used to create the John Skelton Yahoo account was the same IP address that created the Joanne Taylor.
What does that mean?
Functionally, it's the same internet connection. Presumably, the same laptop was used to create both accounts.
Okay. Could you surmise from that John Skelton created those accounts?
Yes.
And then there was a preliminary cart forensic examination of Mr. Skelton's laptop. What did you discover there?
There's another email account that we learned called, I'll spell EQCILDAAN at yahoo.com. And that email account was used to create a profile on a website at Cafe Mom.
Okay. And what is Cafe Mom?
I think it's more of a social media gathering for interested parents to discuss whatever parenting issues or is just general light commentary for parents.
Okay. Do you know the name of that account,
It was Mom Forever Young.
but not spelled correctly?
Correct. His Mom Forever Young was spelled Y-U-N-G.
Okay. And do you remember what date Mom Forever Young joined Cafe Mom?
November 6th, 2010.
And did that account have contact with, or did you learn that Tanya had a Cafe Mom account?
Yes, we learned, our investigation subsequently determined that Tanya Skelton was crafty biker mom at Cafe Mom.
And did you find communication between Mom Forever Young and Crafty Biker Mom?
Yeah, on November 16th, Mom Forever Young sent an introductory message to Crafty Biker Mom on that forum.
And who did Mom Forever Young identify as?
Mom Forever Young identified herself as Joanne.
Is that a reference to Joanne Taylor?
Yes.
Okay. And did you also learn during these examinations on November 13th, there was some online searches done? What were those searches for?
We learned through our analysis that John Skelton's laptop was used to conduct online searches. Part of the searches included a search for potassium cyanide, the availability of prussic acid. Is rat poison tasteless and odorless? Can rat poison kill a person? Is it odorless and tasteless? Those were the search terms.
What does that mean to you?
Definite interest in finding something that could harm or kill someone.
Okay. And then on November 19th, did you find Now, this is all, I'm still referring to this the forensic examination of the digital devices. Did you learn of something that occurred on November 19th?
At 7:02, Mom Forever Young that left a message for Crafty Biker Mom on that Cafe Mom forum.
Okay. So, Mom Forever Young is John Skelton. Is that correct?
Yes,
And Crafty Biker Mom is Tanya Zuvers. Is that
Yes.
correct? And so you're saying on November 19th at 7:02, is that AM or PM?
AM.
7:02 AM, John Skelton sent a clandestine message. In other words, he was disguising himself as someone and sent a message to Tanya. Is that accurate?
Yes, he was pretending to be Joanne Taylor and sent a message to Tanya Zuvers.
Okay. And then later that same day at 3:01, what did you find out?
At 3:01, Tanya responded and asked, pretty much, who are you? Tried to request, who are you, why are you reaching out? And at the same day, the user said, hey, I'm Joanne Taylor.
Okay. And this is the account that was created by John Skelton.
Yes.
Did this Mom Forever Young, did she give an explanation of how she knew John Skelton?
Yeah, at 4:33, a response was sent back to Tanya, identifying her name as Joanne Taylor, and described a background as to how she knew Tanya and how, in fact, Joanne Taylor knew and met John Skelton. And that description was laid out as they had car trouble. John decided to stop by, help them out, noticed that they had kids, was offering them food, helping them out quite a bit. And also noticed like a Cafe Mom sticker. So he realized that there's a connection with Cafe Mom.
Okay. And this is all found out through this account created by John Skelton, though. Is
Yes.
that correct? Yes.
Yes.
Continuing on with this forensic examination, what about November 20th, 2010?
November 20th at 5:20, the analysis determined that Skelton's laptop was used to conduct an online search at bing.com on how to break a neck. And then further, how can you break someone else's neck with your hands? That was accessed. And then from 5:29 to 5:45, the following searches were conducted: neck and spine, spinal cord, cerebellum, brain, and brainstem.
Okay. And then the next notable discovery would have been November 24th. What was that?
Skelton sent an email to his friend who was in North Carolina, advised his friend in North Carolina by saying, killing myself tonight, but right now I'm fine.
Okay. Through your investigation, when was the last time a non-family member saw the children?
Thursday at 2:30, the Thursday, November 25th, 2010, at 2:30.
Okay, so that would have been Thanksgiving Day?
Thanksgiving Day at 2:30 in the afternoon.
And to the best of your knowledge, he had visitation from November 24th through November 26th?
Right, he was scheduled to return the children at 3 o'clock.
On November
Thanksgiving.
26th, so Black Friday?
Black Friday, yep,
Okay.
yes.
Did you learn of Tanya Zuvers? Where was she located? Where was she at on Thanksgiving Day?
She was having Thanksgiving with her family, not in Morenci, in Kunkel, Ohio.
Okay. Did she inform law enforcement that she had ignored several calls and texts from John?
Yes, she did.
Because she was spending the holiday with her sister, is that accurate?
Yes.
Was there a time that you learned that she being Tanya spoke with John?
Yes, they spoke later that day. When they finally connected, John had said that he was angry, that she wasn't responding to calls. He demanded, do you still love me? Is there a chance of reconciliation? She replied negatively, that there was not. His reply is that she would never hear from him again, and then hung up the telephone.
Did you find out some information about a next-door neighbor, Adam Johnson?
Yeah, Adam Johnson was a next-door neighbor who, on that Black Friday evening, right about 11:30 in the night, heard a car door slam from John Skelton's residence.
You said it was on Black Friday, but did you mean at the end of, it was right before Black Friday?
Yep, I'm
right?
sorry, yes, the 25th,
So on 11:30 PM, Thanksgiving Day?
yes.
Correct. I know the date changes at midnight, but
Yeah, well,
we want to
yeah,
keep the date straight if we can. On November 26th, between 1:10 a.m. and 1:41 a.m., what did you find?
we learned that a message was created at that Cafe Mom address from Mom Forever Young to Crafty Biker Mom. So from John to Tanya, a message was created at that Cafe Mom website.
Okay,
It was not sent.
okay. And then at 5 a.m.?
At 5 a.m., neighbors had driven by John's house and observed that his van was not in the driveway, and they're surprised that his van was gone.
Okay. But that was also the morning of Black Friday,
Yes.
which was not unusual back then to leave, correct?
Yeah,
The sales start
Sure,
early.
yeah, I don't know of his pattern, but yes,
But it would also be a reason that there were witnesses out and about to even notice it.
correct.
Okay. Now that draft, was it eventually sent to Tanya?
Yeah, the draft that was created earlier that day was sent out at 7:02 in the morning from Joanne Taylor, John Skelton to Tanya.
And was there anything remarkable about it?
Yes. The text from that included, "Glad you won't have your boys to fondle or sleep with." And John just dropped his sons off with me, and I will be watching them until he returns.
So John Skelton sends a message to his wife at the time, Tanya, disguised as someone else, saying that John Skelton dropped the kids off to this disguise. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Now, as part of this forensic examination, did you also look at the movement of the cell phone?
Right, a separate examination of his cellular telephone was conducted by our cell phone specialists.
Okay. What'd you find out?
We learned that approximately 4:13 in the morning, his phone was at his house. And then approximately 4:29, the phone had moved from his house away 3.3 miles
Okay.
from his house.
And then,
Between 5:01 and 5:04, the phone continued to move to the vicinity of Lazy River Compound, or Lazy River Campground, located in Bridgewater Township in Williams County, Ohio.
okay. And then what was the next?
At 6:46, the phone had returned to the vicinity of Skelton's residence.
Now, when we say Skelton's residence, we're talking about 112 Congress Street, Emergency, right?
Yes,
And so what you're telling the court is that at approximately 4:29 until 6:46, excuse me, his phone left his residence and traveled into Ohio and returned home. Is that accurate?
yes.
Okay. Now, were you also aware that John Skelton had parenting time visitation with his children during this time?
Yes.
And to your knowledge, was there anyone else at that house during this time?
No,
So it would make sense that he either left the children at home alone or he took them with him.
yes.
What do you believe happened?
I believe that's when the bodies were disposed.
Okay. At approximately 7:15 a.m., what happened?
He was observed by one of his family members at the house of one of his nephews, Brian O'Brien's house.
Okay. And is that where Lisa Kern lived?
I believe so, yes.
And that would be John's aunt.
Yes, some of his family, yes.
And what happened there?
There are 3 winter coats that were dropped off at that residence.
And who did those winter coats belong to?
Andrew, Tanner, and Alexander
Skelton.
Skelton.
Was it cold?
Yes.
So we're talking about Thanksgiving in Michigan.
Thanksgiving in Michigan is cold.
And John Skelton dropped off the boys' winter coats at 7:15 a.m. to his aunt.
Yes.
Did he also leave other belongings?
Yes. He went to Kern's house and left some of his personal belongings, personal items, and advised her to make sure his mother gets this stuff.
Okay. Because he didn't need it.
Apparently not.
Were toothbrushes part of that? Children's toothbrushes?
Yes,
So the children didn't have their winter coats or their toothbrushes?
correct.
Thank you. At 8:54 a.m. that morning, what did you find?
At 8:54, we went, our analysis from his computers, he used an online screen name of John Laser and sent a text message to an Alexandra Noreen, an internet associate, saying, "I'll be dead in 10 minutes," just letting people know.
At approximately 11 a.m., what happened that day?
Tanya reaches out for John and asks if he can pick the kids up at 1 o'clock. And then his response via text is that he and the children were with a friend north of Jackson, Michigan, and he would be unable to return them any earlier. He continues, things are real complicated right now. I'm on the way to Fulton Hospital. I wasn't honest with you. I've been waiting for the boys to come home too.
So he tells Tanya at this point he doesn't have the kids
Correct.
and that he's on the way to the hospital.
Right.
But we don't know why at this point.
Correct.
Through your investigation, did you find out why?
Subsequently, we learned that he had hurt his ankle.
Do you know how he hurt his
I
ankle?
do not know how he hurt his ankle.
Do you know if he was attempting to commit suicide?
I'm sorry?
Do you know if he was attempting to commit suicide?
He reported that he was attempting suicide,
And that's how he hurt his ankle?
presumably.
Yes. Do you know when the last login to Mom Forever Young account was?
November 26th at 11:12.
Okay, so ever since that day, to your knowledge, and the updates of the search warrant, there's been no more activity from that account.
Correct.
And that's the last time John Skelton would have had access to that account, is that right?
That's correct.
So at 1:21 in the afternoon on November 26, what happened?
He called his aunt, Jennifer O'Brien, and asked for a ride to the hospital. Jennifer said she wasn't able to and referred her to Kelsey Borowski. She would be able to provide him a ride to the hospital.
And do you know if she took him there?
Yes, I believe Borowski brought him to the hospital for the ankle, for the injured ankle.
And was Borowski interviewed by the Michigan State Police?
Yes, Borowski was interviewed by the Michigan State Police as part of this investigation.
What did they learn?
Borowski told troopers that Skelton had told her that the children spent the prior night, Thanksgiving evening, at a friend's house, and that Tanya would be upset with him.
And then at 3:30 that afternoon, what did you find? What did you learn?
At that stage, Morenci Police Department went to Skelton's house on Congress to conduct a welfare check. One of the officers entered the house for a welfare check.
What was found?
Upon entry, there was a spiral notebook with a 3-page handwritten suicide note. It was addressed, "Dear Tanya, love John." Certain parts of the note that we learned from the investigation read, "You need to be strong now. Sorry I hurt you yet again. This time it was on purpose and to kill my pain of losing you. I had no one here. It continues, I guess my actions today will guarantee you won't have to see me again or in heaven. I pray God will forgive me, but I know it won't happen. May you find peace in the days to come. You will hate me forever, and I know this.
So this suicide note that you saw, you read, was written to Tanya.
Yes.
And I just want to go back through some of the things you just said. It stated that John was sorry, that he states, I'm sorry to hurt you yet again, but this time it was on purpose. Is that right?
Yes.
And he goes on to say, I guess my actions today will guarantee you won't have to see me again or in heaven. Is that correct?
Yes.
What do you take from all of that?
I think that was his passive admission,
Admission of what?
killing children.
And that part of that is he knows that Tanya can never forgive him for what he did.
Correct.
Last thing on that, you will hate me forever, and I know this. Is that right?
That's correct.
And any doubt in your mind what he was saying?
I have no doubt in my mind,
What was he saying?
Tanya, I killed the boys.
On November 27th, so this would be the next day, Mr. Skelton was interviewed at St. Vincent's Hospital by the Federal Bureau of Investigation.
Yes.
And I know you have reviewed part of that, and you were part of that investigation. Could you tell the court what took place, what you learned from that?
We had two agents from our child abduction response deployment team had contact with John Skelton at the hospital, trying to determine the location whereabouts of the kids. At that stage, I believe they also had Pastor Galloway.
Who is
there.
Pastor
I
Galloway?
think it is the family pastor of the
Okay.
churches, and I think she was helping them out, helping their relationship, their marriage out as well. She was with them. He was interviewed, provided Miranda at the hospital, and over the course of different interviews over that day and the next, he gave many statements to investigators.
Okay. So let's talk about some of those things that he said. Did he talk about Joanne Taylor?
Yes, he did. Initially, prior to talk about Joanne Taylor, he did recall with the investigators that Andrew Alexander and Tanner were in their pajamas the last time before they were taken from the house. One was playing video games. That was about 9 o'clock, and other boys working on the puzzle. So, and about
So they weren't in their winter coats,
they were in their winter coats. They were in the house, being kids,
and they had on PJs.
right?
To the best of your knowledge and based on that investigation, that's what they were wearing. Just
Yep, that's what he told us.
Okay.
That's- Yes. He ended up being very specific as to which pajamas they were in.
Okay.
He advised that he was confronted based on the preliminary information that was obtained, that we believe Joanne Taylor was fictional, that she didn't exist, that she was not part of this interaction, and that it looked like the person that he created in the Cafe Mom was in fact him, posing as Joanne Taylor. He said he understood and he did not deny that statement to investigators. He didn't contest that it was not him posing as Joanne Taylor.
Okay.
And then he also advised a week prior to this interview, he was online researching ways to commit suicide, perhaps by breaking his neck.
Okay.
He continued identifying Thursday, November 25th, on Thanksgiving. He recalled playing with the boys, helping them get into their pajamas. And that sometime after 9 o'clock, he wrapped them in blankets, giving each boy a stuffed animal, And then he placed them in his van, putting the younger boys in booster seats, and making sure they were all in the seat belts. He said that Drew was dressed in brown pajama pants with an orange stripe on the side. He did not remember what type of top Andrew wore that night. Tanner was dressed in camouflage pants and a Scooby-Doo shirt.
But he described them as
He
PJs.
described, yes. He
Sleeping
described that
clothes.
they're sleeping clothes, right.
Okay. Now, he didn't recall the stuffed animals,
Correct.
or which ones,
Yeah, he
who he
wasn't-
gave to what.
Right, he wasn't certain what stuffed animals he
Okay.
gave.
At some point, the Federal Bureau of Investigation advised him that based on the viewing the pings of the cell phone, the examination of cell phone towers, that he wasn't home.
Correct, they confronted him that he was approximately 20 miles southwest of his house, right about 5 o'clock in that morning. Skelton told the investigators that he did not recall leaving his home.
Okay. But then, as this conversation continued, did he say that they may be in a schoolhouse?
Yes, he said, he indicated that he directed the investigators to go look in an old brick schoolhouse in Kunkel. He described the schoolhouse as a 2-brick building with a chain link fence, pretty specific about it. He said it was deserted, but still open. He advised the history that he used to meet Tanya's sister there and exchange tomatoes, and that the family lived very close to that schoolhouse in Kunkel.
Okay. And do you know if that schoolhouse was searched?
Yes.
And what-
We deployed a team very quickly there.
So while this investigation while this interview is happening, there's a team searching the schoolhouse?
Right. We would get actionable intelligence, and we had sent it out to investigators who would resolve that as quickly as they could.
So safe to say there were a number of law enforcement officials working this case all at the same time.
There's a large number of investigators from many different jurisdictions and agencies, and a large response to this Kunkel school.
Okay. And so nothing was found at the schoolhouse? is that
Correct.
right? And then was he confronted with that information?
Yes, he was confronted, and then he provided a separate place to look.
And what was that?
Well, the story that he brought up was that he had a nightmare that scared him, and he envisioned that he was standing in Holiday City, Ohio,
Okay.
on Highway 15. He is across the street and described a nice hotel where he had stayed with Tanya in the past. Had good memories about that event. He further directed investigators to a dumpster that was adjacent or in the immediate area of this hotel. It was next to a mom and pop restaurant.
Okay.
And he advised agents that there was a light there. He's very specific about it. And I think he drew a map or was provided some sort of reference and put an X on the spot that agents should go searching for the boys in the dumpster. He was encouraging investigators to leave now and go check
Right.
that dumpster.
To the point that he actually shoved one, right?
Yeah, he had physical contact with one of the agents to compel her to go search that site.
Okay. Now, did he continue on to talk about Joanne Taylor being there?
Yes, Joanne Taylor came back in, and that during his dream, he described having tunnel vision and seeing that he saw his van pull up next to the dumpster, and then he saw Joanne Taylor there, and saw Joanne Taylor get out of his car. And he was concerned that if it was Joanne Taylor, is actually him getting out of the car.
So he was, not my words, I want you to use your words, but what I'm understanding is he tells the investigators that he may be Joanne Taylor.
In effect, yes. Yes. He said that if the person getting out of the car was Joanne Taylor, that would be him.
And in fact, doesn't he say that I need you to go search this dumpster to find out if I'm a child killer?
Yes, he was concerned that people could construe him as being a monster or to have murdered his children.
Now, did the FBI send out their emergency response team in conjunction with this dumpster and subsequently the landfill?
Yes, we conducted an investigation. By the time we showed up at the dumpster was empty.
Okay.
So we conducted an investigation as to what company would pick that up and where it would go. We identified the company who picked it up, and they're very specific about where that the contents of those dumpsters were placed in the landfill.
Okay.
So as a result, we had specific instructions. Our evidence response team went to that specific site and engaged in a physical search of that area with negative results.
Okay. And when you say conducted a search, was it a cursory search?
No, it was a very thorough search.
Okay. And nothing was found?
Nothing of relevance to this matter was found.
Now, towards the end of that interview, I'm sorry, give me 1 second. I'm going to refer you to one of the reports based out of that interview. But in the report, it talks about when Skelton is recounting his dream and he talks about Joanne. What's his physical reaction?
He had a strong physical reaction. He began to cry heavily and hyperventilate.
Okay. And this is during the time where he's questioning if he is Joanne Taylor.
Yes, yes. He said he got hot, his chest hurt. He just had a very strong visceral response when brought back to that dream and his debate whether or not he was Joanne Taylor.
And he was insistent that the boys were in that dumpster.
Absolutely.
I think you may have already spoke to this, but one of the questions that he had for agents was about whether he was a monster or not. Can you
Correct.
talk about that?
Yes, he brought up going to the dumpster, said that is where you're going to find the stuff, meaning the boys. You're going to find the boys there. The boys got to be there. The boys are not in an open field, is what he told investigators. He offered that he was 95% sure that the boys were in the dumpster. And that's when he started to cry, have that visceral response, directed one of the agents to leave and go find my boys. And the concern turned to that he needed to find out if he was a monster. That's what he told the investigators, that if they found the boys, everybody would think he is a child killer and a murderer.
So everything that you learned from this interview, does it suggest to you that he killed the children?
Absolutely,
When I say he, I mean John Skelton.
yes.
Any doubt in your mind he killed these
No
children?
doubt in my mind.
Okay. So he was also confronted during this interview about the fact that he took their coats and toothbrushes to two of his aunts. What was his reaction to that?
His reaction, he took the items to his aunt's home because they did not need them anymore.
And when he said that they did not need them anymore, did he provide any plausible explanation of them being alive and needing anything like that?
November in Michigan, you always need a jacket. Your kids, you always need to brush your teeth.
Was he speaking of the children as if they were deceased at that point?
I don't specifically recall.
Now, he talked about when he returned home after dropping this stuff off at his aunt's. So he dropped off the coats, the toothbrushes, and the laptop, several things. And he talks about going home. What did he talk about doing when he went home?
Committing suicide.
Okay. And did he talk about how?
Yeah, he was debating using a knife or jumping off the roof of his house. He decided that instead he'd bind his hands and feet with pieces of tie-down strap and jump off the second floor banister from a noose that was located at the house.
Okay. Now, you said the first night that you got involved in this, part of your personal responsibility was to go to that house.
Yes,
And when I say that house, I'm talking about 112 Congress Street.
yes,
Did you go there?
yes.
What did you observe inside that house?
It was destroyed.
Okay.
Personal items, a big cabinet was knocked over, dishes broken, cords, extension cords, cords to the TV were cut, car keys were cut, a significant amount of disarray. It's like something had exploded in the house. We noticed a noose was hanging from the second floor. From the upstairs, it was tied around the banister and hanging, that you could see it from the first floor when looking up the staircase.
Okay.
The house was in significant disarray.
Do you remember the master bedroom?
The master bedroom was upstairs, again in significant disarray. I observed that the mattress was full. It was a larger mattress that was shredded. It appeared as though a knife had been put in the mattress and pulled down in many slices.
Just
were
repeatedly?
taken. Repeatedly, yes.
Okay. So destroyed.
Destroyed, unusable ever again.
So this is consistent. What you saw is consistent with this interview of what he said he was going to do.
Yes.
Okay. Now, at the end of this interview, why did the interview finally end? Or how, I should say.
The interview ended when he requested an attorney.
Okay.
So the interview ended thereafter.
Was that the last interview that he gave without an attorney? To your knowledge?
To my knowledge, yes.
Okay. And just for a reference, I'm back to page 12 of the chronological. Physicians and staff at Fulton County Health Center, were they talked to?
Yeah, the physicians and staff were helpful while they were still triaging and trying to, they knew what we were doing. They were trying to help us locate children. They provided statements. They told us what he had told them.
Okay.
And there are differing versions, nothing that we could act upon.
But some of the stuff that he was telling them had to do with how he was going to commit suicide. Is that right?
Yes,
And that's important because when you're treating someone, it's important to know why you're treating someone, right?
yes.
What did you learn from those stories? Were they all similar?
No,
Were
they're
they-
disorganized. There's no consistency to the stories that he is providing medical staff. There's nothing that we could do, that we could use to help locate these children.
So fair to say, the one thing you did learn is that John Skelton is a liar.
That was clear.
Now, he was eventually transferred from Fulton County to a crisis center,
Yes,
and that would be, and he also was admitted to St. Vincent's Hospital, right?
yes.
And did you try to speak to their staff?
Yes, we were unable to gain any information from that staff.
In
from their
fact, they
staff.
were unwilling to be interviewed.
Correct.
Okay. Now, further, there were search warrants done. Let's talk about the search warrant of the Skelton's residence. I know we don't have to go in, if you've already talked about it, don't go into complete detail, but that search warrant, you were actually in the house, so you saw all this stuff, and we talked about the noose. And where was Skelton's vehicle?
is parked next to his house.
So when you get there, the van that John Skelton drove was at the house.
Yes.
Okay. What was inside the van?
Nothing of any significance.
Except were the children's booster seats in there?
The booster seats were in.
Okay.
Van.
So you're a law enforcement officer in Michigan. Children of a certain age, are they required to be in a booster seat?
Yes.
If you were going to turn your children over to someone to drive them, would you provide them a booster seat?
Yes.
Where were the booster seats?
In the back seat, in the van.
Okay. So winter coats are at Aunt's house, toothbrushes are at Aunt's house. The kids are only in PJs somewhere, according to his statements. And the booster seats to transport the children are still inside the van.
Yes, and their asthma medicine and nebulizer were still in the house.
So the children took asthma medication,
Yes.
and during this search, you found
It was
the asthma?
located in the house. Yes.
What's a nebulizer?
I believe it helps clear the lungs out during, leading up to an asthma attack.
Okay. And so all that stuff was still in the house.
Yes.
So if by chance any of this story could have been true, obviously medicine would have been taken with the children,
Yes.
or you would suppose. Now, as part of these search warrants, there were also more internet history. I think we've already talked about the potassium cyanide, prussic acid, and rat poisoning, but that was all discovered again through search warrants, correct?
Correct.
There was also a search warrant for the Skelton MySpace. Familiar with that? Bones does it. And also, I'm at the bottom of page 14.
Yeah, there was a large, the search warrants were expansive.
Okay. But that is where we discovered, or excuse me, where you discovered that all of the accounts had been created from the same IP address.
Yes.
And that was consistent with Congress Street in Morenci, Michigan.
Yes.
Okay. So I'm going to move you forward to November 26th, around midnight. I'm on page 16. And there was a time where Pastor Galloway drove to the Fulton County Health Center and spoke directly with John Skelton. You familiar with that?
I do. I am.
And what happened?
During the course, Pastor Galloway would have contact with John Skelton many times, and she provided that information to us. At approximately 9 o'clock, John Skelton told Galloway that Joanne had picked up the boys on Friday, November 26th, between 10 and 11 a.m. In the morning. He believed Joanne's last name was Taylor, and that Joanne had visited his home previously.
Okay.
And that the next day, she had shown up between 10 and 11 and picked the boys up.
Okay.
That's what he told Galloway. Later on, at about midnight, when she had contact with John again, he was pretty upset and told Pastor Galloway that, I miss them so much. And Pastor Galloway asked, where are they? He said, they're home. They're at home. She pressed, and that she spoke to John Skelton again, and said he told her on the 27th that nobody believes me. They think I made up Joanne, that she's in my head. Seeking for clarification when Joanne picked the boys up, Galloway asked, so the boys didn't go with Joanne in the morning, Friday. Skelton told her that the boys went with Joanne Thursday night.
So that would have been Thanksgiving night,
Yes.
okay?
Galloway asked directly where he took the boys, and he replied, home. I sent them home. Don't you understand? I sent them home.
Okay. What does that statement mean to you?
That he sent them to heaven.
Okay. Mark Pilbeam was then interviewed by the FBI. What did you learn from?
Confirmed that they were friends, and we confirmed that that equidan@yahoo.com was John Skelton's email account.
Okay. So one of the emails that you discovered that was created from the same IP address, you confirmed was in fact John
Yes.
Skelton. Okay, and that would have been his public email that he used with friends or whatever?
This is well known to be his email address that he used to contact Pilbeam.
Now, further, did Pilbeam say anything about Skelton talking to him about not being able to have the kids?
Yeah, he recalled that John told them, if I can't have the kids, then she'll never have the kids either.
And do you understand that to mean she being Tanya Zuvers?
Yes. And then he followed it up by saying that he would take the boys from Tanya, as he did before when they traveled to Florida in September 2010.
And then was Sandra Aarons interviewed?
She was interviewed, and we learned that she was John Skelton's aunt.
Okay.
And leading up, during the interview, she recalled that they had many conversations and his interest in committing suicide. And then he also had very graphic comments about killing Tanya.
Back to the search of the residence. Could you go through the things that were found? And you don't have to go into extreme detail, but what was found in the search of the home? A rose, I think there was a rose.
Yeah, there was, I recall, a rose that was attached to the wall with a written statement. This is the rose that my first rose that Tanya had ever given me. That was, I think, affixed to the wall in some manner. I don't recall.
Was there also one about the last rose?
Yeah, in the last rose, there was also one I think that was affixed to the wall.
And this china cabinet that you described, what was inside of it?
Nothing was, but it was already knocked over.
Okay.
All the contents were strewn about. Yeah, it looked like everything had been destroyed.
Now, were you aware that there was a large search party put together, which lasted multiple days? Are you aware of that?
Yes.
And this consisted of fire departments and volunteers.
Yes.
Do you know what they searched, where they searched?
Yeah, there were maps that were placed up in the command post. Those
these?
maps, and they just did a targeted area for places they would search, primarily based on the cell phone, the location, or if there's any actionable intelligence that we could work based on the interviews with John, such as Kunkel or other places that he said they would be. We had dispatched people out there, but there was a separate auxiliary of people that would search lakes, areas of land that were arranged by private citizens or private organizations. I believe, I think I can't remember the name of the official, some police chief or fire chiefs also assisted in directing those land searches.
Were there also water searches?
There was also water searches as well, and that was via the City of Toledo Fire and Rescue. I think they had the most availability, and there were a number of locations of places that they had searched in the water.
So I know they'd searched a couple of lakes, but they had also searched that Lazy River campground
Yes.
area. Is that right?
Yes.
Including what was determined to be an unnamed lake, so a body of water that was on that campground was searched.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes.
So I know you worked this case from November 26th, and I assume you've kept up with it as it's going on. Is that correct?
That is.
So it's been almost 15 years since this happened. Is there any doubt in your mind what happened to those children?
I have no doubt in my mind
What
that
do you
John
think?
Skelton killed Andrew Tanner and Alexander Skelton.
Is there any doubt in your mind that it happened on or about November 26, 2010?
No doubt in my mind.
I have no further questions at this time.
Yes. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
You testified to being involved in the case almost immediately after that Amber Alert had went out on, I believe it was November 26th of 2010. But can you tell us whether you are actively still involved in the investigation, or at what point did you stop being involved in the investigation?
I don't have the exact date, but there was a formal transition of case management and OIC responsibility to the Michigan State Police. I don't know the exact time, but Michigan State Police has been the primary responding agency.
Okay. And when you were still involved in the investigation, were there any calls from the public regarding any tips of the children being seen or anything like that?
Yes, there's a significant response. We had a database set up, Rapid Start, I think is what it was called, might have been called CMC, where all the intake would be received, typed and assigned and resolved. So towards the latter part of the Bureau's investigation, we had an agreement with the state police that we would cover all matters outside the state of Michigan, just based on our resources and our reach, where the Michigan State Police would resolve any in-state tips.
Okay, so based on the tips then that the FBI would have been responsible for, so outside of the state of Michigan, were there any tips that came in that led to any significant searches with regards to those tips?
No significant searches outside the state of Michigan. I think primarily we were doing interviews, just running information down, but
Okay.
nothing significant.
Do you believe there were any credible tips that came in outside of the state of Michigan that you or the FBI were involved in?
I believe the callers believe them to be credible to their situation, but as it relates specifically to the Skelton matter, there has not been a solid investigative tip that leads us to a solid disposition in this case.
Okay. Based on just the media and things that, pop up on the internet, it appears that there were allegedly some calls that came in Sandusky, Ohio, regarding a sighting of the boys with a lady. Do you recall that?
We've had a number of tips. I vaguely recall tips that came out of Sandusky.
Okay. And can you give examples of what types of things the FBI would do to actually look into those tips?
As it relates to Sandusky, if my memory is correct, I believe there's a lady that was seen with two or three children that resembled the Skelton kids at a cafe. Typically, we would resolve those by going to the cafe, the restaurant, to the venue, having contact with the manager, taking a look at any video, any other available information that we could via interview waitresses, managers, that sort of.
Okay. Are you aware of if Tanya Zuvers was at any point considered a suspect in this matter?
I was never aware that she was, I'm not aware she's ever considered a suspect in this matter.
Okay. Are you aware of any other people other than John Skelton that have been considered a suspect or maybe still are considered a suspect?
Not in the investigative, in the tips, everybody says this guy did it, that guy did it, but those have never been founded. It's our position within the FBI that it's my opinion that he is the only subject in this matter.
Okay. You testified a little bit about John Skelton and the alleged suicide attempt that occurred on November 26th of 2010. And I believe when you were testifying to it, you were asked a question about it and you said reportedly. So can you, I guess, elaborate on that and whether you believe the suicide attempt was an actual attempt or maybe was it a cover-up, or what are your thoughts on that?
My thoughts on the suicide, there was no evidence indicative that he attempted to hang himself or stab himself. The only damage that he reported to have was damage to his ankle, which he went to the medical center. And I don't know if that's a result from falling off a ladder, burying anything, or falling off a banister. I don't know. There's no information for me to believe the source or how that occurred.
Okay. And you testified that he allegedly did this with a noose. What was that noose made out of?
The noose, I recall, is a thinner cord, light tan in color, maybe a half-inch thick. This is long. I remember seeing the picture, but it was more of a, it was just more of a cord.
Okay. Can you describe John Skelton's demeanor when you had contact with him personally around the time of November 26, 2010?
I had not had contact with him during that time. It was always our child abduction response team, special agents or troopers that would have that immediate response. I showed up. He was already in a medical facility, so I didn't have contact with him.
Okay. Were you made aware of anything by those people that did actually have contact with him regarding his demeanor that was significant or stood out?
Yeah, during the interviews, he is pretty emotional. And just like, as I noted before, when we brought up the idea that he thought he was, you expected that he was Joanne Taylor, he had that visceral response of the heart was beating very heavily, and he had very strong emotional response via crying and breathing. And that information was provided to us.
Okay. And based on that response, in your professional opinion, based on your trainings and your time with the FBI, is that a consistent reaction, or I guess a typical reaction for somebody whose children allegedly are somewhere they don't know where they're at?
I think there's a myriad of emotional responses. If my kids are missing, I'm going to be very emotional. I'm going to have a very visceral response. So I don't think that made it any more special, his response to either allegations of him killing his kids or just not knowing where they're at. He is very emotional.
Okay. And I know you already testified to the mattress in John's bedroom from when the search was conducted around November 26th, but was there anything about the children's room that stood out to you or was of significance?
I just recall the mattresses were on the floor. One of the mattresses did not have a sheet. It wasn't orderly. There was a bunch of toys and stuff all over. I believe from the master bed, or the first floor, second floor, main bedroom where the bed was sliced up, the bedroom to the left had two mattresses on the floor. One was just a mattress without any sheets on top of it. It was just complete disarray.
Okay. And are you aware of, if the time that John was interviewed by the FBI, if John ever made any statements or gave any indication of why the house looked the way it did?
I don't specifically recall.
Okay. If you know, or if you can answer this, and based on your professional opinion and experience, do you have any ideas of why the house would have looked the way it did?
My experience or my training, I would imagine after such an event, that there's a lot of anger. And I do recall that John, when he cut up the keys, he wanted to make sure Tanya couldn't get anything back. Any of her private personal items in the house were destroyed, and there'd be no value to anything in the house that perhaps Tanya could take and use.
Was there anything that was visibly destroyed or damaged that belonged to the children within the home?
I don't recall.
Okay. You testified to the data showing that John's phone had been moving from Morenci to parts of Ohio and then back to Michigan in the early hours of November 26th. Do you believe that John was the person that was actually traveling with that phone at that point in time?
Yes.
Okay. And has there ever been any evidence that has been discovered that would suggest that anyone else was involved in whatever happened during the events on November 26, 2010, other than John Skelton?
No new evidence.
You testified about the dumpster that John alleged he put the boys in Kunkel, Ohio, and that there were searches there. Do you recall how extensive the searches were around that specific area?
Yeah, we had a good team that took off pretty quickly down there. I believe it was also supplemented with cadaver dogs, trying to pick up the potential cadaver odors or remnants thereof. And there was not a positive hit there. There was no indication of a body or things that cadaver dogs would locate.
Okay. Do you know if cadaver dogs were ever used to search the van?
I do not know.
Okay. Did you ever personally go to Holiday City, Ohio while those searches were ongoing?
No.
Okay. And you testified that it was both law enforcement as well as people from the public helping with those searches in Holiday City, Ohio, correct?
Not in Holiday City, Ohio. There was a group, I believe it was out of North Carolina, that were specifically trained in doing some grid searches in open fields and different sorts. That wasn't an immediate response to the incident. That was subsequent searches after things got controlled a little bit.
Okay. And you testified earlier to John making a statement that he was adamant that the boys had been in a dumpster and that they were not in any open fields. Did his comment regarding specifically them not being in open fields, did that stand out to you at all?
It did, and that just came from later on investigation in the steps. We utilized the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. They're a national organization that helps us in many different sorts of crimes against children. And we learned kind of the profiling angle, or at least what, like when parents kill their children, the manners in which they would kill their children or where they dispose of the bodies. So it was, looking back now, typically parents aren't going to leave their children laying out in the middle of the woods. They're going to take other certain steps to try to protect them in their mindset. It's what I learned from Nick Mick and one of the profilers.
Okay. You testified about those internet searches that John Skelton had done on the computer prior to the boys last being seen, which involved searches with rat poisoning and whether it could kill. Was the home search to see if there was any rat poisoning within the home?
Yes, we looked for every possible cause or ability to kill.
Okay. And no rat poisoning was ever found?
No.
Okay. Was it looked into of whether John had purchased any anything significant that was, you know, suspicious or, I guess, stood out around the time of November 2010?
Yeah, a financial investigation was conducted as well to try to track where he's been, gas, maybe bought wherever. It was noted the funds were depleted or at a negative balance, so there's no financial information that we obtained from a review of his finances leading up to the incident offense.
Did John Skelton ever give a reason for stating that he wrapped the boys in blankets while they were allegedly in their pajamas with those stuffed animals and putting them in the van?
He just provided the information that that's what he did. He didn't provide why.
Okay. I know that the three boys obviously were last seen in 2010, and we've had significant advances in technology since then, but were there any street cameras or anything like that that were available to be searched at that point in time?
The incident offense, I do recall that there's a gas station maybe at the main intersection of Morenci or in that southwesterly direction that we did research, and we did not find any information that would be of value.
Okay. You mentioned very graphic comments being made by John regarding killing Tanya. Can you give a bit more detail about that and whether it had any significance in the searches and how those were performed with the children?
No. The information came after everything calmed down in the searches. He was a tertiary interview of contacts, so we interviewed him later. I think it was Pillbeam or whoever. He provided, here's some historical information about what we talked about. So we didn't have that information at the time that all the events were going on.
Okay. How long after you became involved in the investigation did you believe or determine in your mind that the children were deceased and were not missing?
Probably within the first 72 hours.
Okay. Do you know if that was the same opinion and about the same time frame as the other investigators from the FBI?
I don't know. I didn't ask. I don't know. I think my perspective was different. I was managing a case. So I was like a hub of information, kicking leads out and analyzing information and setting people out. So I had a lot better flow of information. They would almost come to me. Chief Weeks, one of the we had a senior agent with me as well, and even some MSP detectives that were working with us. So I think our perspectives were probably different because many of our people were just assigned, go out here, do that, go out here, do that. So I don't know if their opinions, I didn't ask, and I don't know if they would have an opinion based on what their role was.
Okay. Are you aware if the children had passports at the time that they had last been seen?
I don't know if they had passports.
Okay. Do you think it's possible, based on all of the evidence that you're aware of, that these children are out there in a different country somewhere, or, maybe in the United States somewhere, just not being found?
I think their bodies are someplace in this area. I don't think they're anywhere else but in this general area.
Okay. Is there anything else that you have not already testified to today with regards to the children being deceased that you wish to testify to or that you think is helpful?
No, I think you have been thorough.
Okay. I have nothing further. Thank you.
Did you say at one point, excuse me, that John and Tanya had a conversation that you reviewed on the night of the 26th?
I believe that was a text conversation about her asking to get the boys back. Or could have been, he was upset that she wasn't responding to his calls while she was at Thanksgiving. And then it was later that night in which they either had text or phone conversation where he was upset with her and that I believe I'd look back, but you won't ever see me again or something to that effect. And I don't know if that's telephonic, talking, or texting.
Thank you. All right, any redirect, Mr. Castleberry?
No, Your Honor.
Any other questions, Ms. Stang?
No, thank you.
Any reason we should not thank and excuse our witness? Okay, thank you so much for your time and your testimony and your efforts in the case. Pass that along to Mr. Weeks, too, please.
Thank you.
All right, at this time, we're going to take a break for lunch. See you back here at 1:30 to resume our proceedings for the afternoon. All right, very good. Okay, court's in recess.
All rise, please. Dave, what did you get done?